Welcome everyone, Marcelo is my name. I'm the niche fragrance collector. I love all things niche perfumery. And I think I love all things niche perfumery because in a lot of cases, they're either family-owned businesses or it's an individual who is expressing themselves creatively via perfume. And therefore they're a lot more adventurous. They take a lot more risks than, and again, nothing wrong with designer fragrances. However, designer fragrances are designed to sell, and so they have to appeal to a massive audience. They don't necessarily take really extreme risks, you know, because, and in a way, and again, nothing against designer fragrances, they are a little bit predictable. So when I smell a designer fragrance, I know already the kind of components I'm going to be smelling. However, with niche perfumery, sometimes they can really surprise you. One of the surprises is leather. So when I first sprayed my first leather fragrance, it was like, oh my goodness, it was like tasting something for the first time. I'm like, I'm like, why would you want to? But at the same time, I'm like, why would you not? I mean, this is divine. But I've tried to unbox, why is it that we love, or why is it that I love leather fragrances? But the truth is, why do we collectively love? I know why I'm drawn to it, and I believe it's because it transmits luxury really quickly. In one breathing in that scent, it just transmits luxury, it transmits a certain suaveness. I love also that there is a duality to it in the sense that it transmits a level of animalic rawness, power, potency, with subtlety, suppleness, not femininity, but a gentleness at the same time. So there's this beautiful interplay of, you know, like strength and rawness, but at the same time with, and I think it's because I guess we know leather comes from, essentially, is a derivative of an animal, of a beast of some sort that was strong, well, definitely stronger than us as a human, but yet it's been created into this beautiful supple bag or shoes or something. And so there's an interplay of these two components. And I think all that magic all comes together in this beautiful scent of this leather. Now, what I've done, this is only a few of my leather fragrances. And it's interesting because you think to yourself, once you have a leather perfume, then you've got a leather perfume. Just like if you had a rose perfume, then you've got a rose perfume. I beg to differ, my good friends. Those who are into niche perfumery realize that a rose is not necessarily a rose. And in this case, leather or a leather scent isn't necessarily just a leather scent. So if you're new to niche and you'd like to know where to begin, I'm going to give you a bit of a lay of the land. This is my suggestion, at least. And especially on how I discovered leather fragrances and how I added them to my collection. This icon here, obviously a leather looking hide. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show the level of intensity when it comes to that very pronounced leather note. The leather note is, I guess, the champion note of that fragrance, but then it's accented in different ways depending on, you know, these particular fragrances that I've lined up here for you guys. So let me begin. I would like to recommend to you WIDIAN London as a starting point. This is new to my collection. I've had this probably about a month now, and this for me is like a classic leather fragrance. When you think leather, you naturally go to some kind of leather product, whether it be shoes or a bag or a jacket or something of that nature. This for me, or this fragrance, epitomizes that article beautifully. You're not going to, so if you wear this, you're not going to be wearing necessarily a leather jacket or anything of that nature. But I think what it transmits, or in my mind, what it transmits is elegance. It transmits a suaveness. It transmits, I think, a sense of luxury too. Like you've actually got something on which just gives you a level of confidence or a level of sophistication. For me, this is just beautiful, pure leather. This is a beautiful, clean leather fragrance. It does have in the heart note raspberry, and I know in the base it does have vanilla. They don't overshadow what I believe the leather note should smell like. So when I grab like a beautiful leather bag that you would buy in Florence, for instance, and you smell that, it smells like leather. It's a leather fragrance that emits from that bag. And I find that this perfume here does that just so beautifully. It's very subtle, it's very sophisticated. It's comfortably a fragrance that a man or a woman could wear. You would feel, this feels at home. This fragrance feels at home on your skin. I find that the longevity on this is phenomenal. 6+ hours comfortably. I find that the sillage on this is also very strong. It has this beautiful moderate to full trail. And I find that the projection on this is also just amazing. But it's not over the top. It's sweet, but there's like a leathery tone to it. And that's just it. It's not an overpowering leather fragrance. There is an airiness to this particular fragrance. I think the name of the fragrance is beautifully defined, London. For me, when I think of London, and I guess cliche, suave, I think of Savile Row, I think of James Bond, I think of well-dressed, I think of refinement. This is definitely a spring fragrance, so we're not at that high heat component. It is it's comfortable when it comes to that weather, and I feel that London will perform its best then. This is a fragrance that is day to day. I find that it's comfortably, an office fragrance is comfortably a going out fragrance. This is something that it does project us a level of confidence about you. Next. When I came into niche back in 2017 and discovered that there was an olfactory family, which was leather, I discovered it first via MEMO. They've got a collection called Cure Nomade, which is their nomadic leather range. They've actually said that every nation fragrances their actual leather product, whether bags or shoes, etc., with a particular accent. The one that I would like to put forward to you is French leather. I was in a masterclass with the owner. So the owner is John and Clara Malloy. It was a masterclass with John Malloy. And one of the women in that class, when she smelt the fragrance, actually let me spray it. So when she smelt, and she told the story of how the smell of this particular perfume reminded her of her mother and her mother's handbag. Her mother had purchased that handbag in Paris. And John in that particular class said, French leather product has a distinct rose accent to it. And this is this fragrance. This is a comfortable fragrance for either a man or a woman. For a man, it has the woodier components to it. It does have that rose accent, but then those woody components, the sage that's in there, and the leather also plays a beautiful part. For a woman, because of the rose, it gives it a different edge. It's not a floral fragrance, but at the same time, it's not a heavy leather fragrance either. As a family, we are big perfume lovers. We're very deep into all things perfumery. One thing that we've identified is that a beautiful fragrance, that olfactory memory of a fragrance can actually lock in a moment in time. At the birth of my son's daughter, he decided to use French leather. Every time he sprays French leather, it transmits that memory of him being with his newborn daughter. On skin, this is magic. I find that for me on skin, the rose pops a little bit more, but never becomes a floral fragrance. The woody, the leathery components to this fragrance stays intact, but just with a roundness, a softness of that rose coming through. As a masculine fragrance, amazing. As a female fragrance, just pure magic. I love wearing this as a cooler weather. So on a cool evening, cool days. As an office fragrance, fantastic. I find that the sillage on this is moderate. I find that the projection also falls into that moderate category, and I'm getting 8+ hours comfortably on this fragrance. Sprayed in the morning, come to the evening, I can still smell that sweet or that rose component along with that beautiful leather scent that this fragrance provides. Okay, so we've gone classic leather, rose accent, but if you do want to have a fragrance that transmit a bit more masculinity, I would recommend to you ETUI Noir. So it has an elemi resin on the opening. It does have incense. And a lot of people say, oh, this is an incense fragrance. I don't detect the incense as clear. So for me, when I think of incense, I do think amouage and that very distinct frankincense or myrrh smokiness that, that those particular fragrances have. What I get more from here is almost a herbal, definitely a much more greener masculine edge. I know that in the base it has vetiver and patchouli, and I feel that those notes tend to be classic masculine sort of barbershop style of notes. There is a more of a balsamic resin component to this. For me, this is my confident man fragrance. This could also be a day-to-day fragrance. I know that Elemi is in the opening of the fragrance, so I don't know how much it actually transmits all the way through the actual perfume, but there's a herbal quality in this particular fragrance. I find that for me, I'm getting a comfortable 8 to 9 hours, no problems at all with this particular fragrance. I also feel that its sillage is moderate, and also its projection falls into that moderate category. My wife does not like leather fragrances. She finds them way too heavy, very raw, very animalic. 2 fragrances that she enjoys on me when it comes to leather. One is London, soft, suave, sophisticated. And the second is this. I went up to her before I started filming. I said, smell me, what do you think I smell like? And she's like, oh, leather, but I don't mind it. And in the past, she actually has detected this fragrance on me. Comfortable, day-to-day, office, going out, evening, date, you name it. This fragrance is exceptionally versatile, and one, in truth, I don't hear a lot about. If you want to find just a divine leather fragrance, then I would recommend to you ETUI Noir. I like using perfume as an olfactory photograph. If I want to remember a moment in time, and similar to what my son did at the birth of his daughter, I'll take a perfume. I purposely will either buy one if I'm going to a location, or I'll take a fragrance if I'm going to somewhere and I want to remember this. Milano from Fragrance du Bois is my return to normality when it comes to all things travel. Without naming the name, we went collectively across the world through a period in time recently, which was, I think, very hard on all of us. One of the things that we encountered during this period was the sense of isolation. And for me, what I also encountered, which really, it actually disrupted my soul, and that was the thought that I would never, ever travel again. I love all things perfumery, but I love experiencing travel. I love being in new locations. One, because I love the adventure of it, but two, also, there is every city, and mark me for this, every city has its own olfactory signature. You go to somewhere and you can smell something in the air. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's the trees that are in that area or but every city has a particular olfactory signature to it. Milano by Fragrance du Bois marks for me the return of travel and walking, actually I'm gonna put it on skin. And walking back into normality again. I had an opportunity to go to Milan for Exons for the very first time. It was the first time I had ever been to Milan. And as a way to commemorate that moment, I got Milano from Fragrance du Bois to mark this occasion. Every time I smell this perfume, actually I did it just then, I did it on purpose. I wanted to smell, see if you know, what was I getting? I'm actually getting a balcony, bright sunny day, Kevin is with me, and a gentleman by the name of Daniel, who is from Fragrance du Bois. And I can see the city, I can see Milan in front of me, or Milano in front of me. And this fragrance, just, I tell you, it just brings me back to that moment in time. For those who haven't, so okay, that's my olfactory experience. Why would you even consider Milano as a fragrance? What I love about this, and different to the others that we've just experienced, is that it uses a beautiful fruit note as part of its composition. I was going to say in its opening, but I don't think it has it in the opening. I believe it's actually in the heart. On opening, you are getting citrus. Actually, the fruit notes in here are divine. And I love that when you look at the description, it doesn't tell you it's this or that or the other. It just says basket of fruit or fruit notes, I think, something to that effect. When I smell it, I love that I detect different things at different times. Just before, as I was speaking with you, I detected like a peach along with a mango. I get melon notes. But that leather, so sometimes I find that leather can be quite a pungent, quite a pronounced note. It's leather. Like this, it's not pungent and it's not pronounced, but it's leather. It has a very clear, in my mind, leather component to it. Whereas here, I find that it's suede. For me, it's a very soft, supple leather note, which I would translate as suede. It's blended just so beautifully with these fruit notes that never go away. I know that when some people smell this, they say that they detect like a raspberry note. It's not as prevalent for me. For me, it's more exotic fruits that I'm picking up out of it. There is a slight, actually, you know what? I'm gonna spray this one on skin, yes, because I'm reluctant to spray the other ones because they're powerhouses. But anyway, I've got more skin on my arms. I'll do it on my arm. Because I want to see the difference. I know that I mentioned earlier, this does have a raspberry and a vanilla note. This, ladies and gentlemen, please, this is pure magic. This is divine. Oh my gosh. I do detect a slight fruit and sweetness to it. Call it raspberry if you want. It's not clear raspberry note. I know that there's another fragrance by Argos, Bacio Immortale, which has a very clear, distinct raspberry note. That's not here, okay? So there is a sweetness, but it's not, I'm not going, it's raspberry. And the fruit here, Milano, exceptional. I find that the longevity on this, again, 8 to 9 hours without a problem. I'll wake up in the morning and I can't detect. So I'm saying 8 to 9 hours that I feel that I'm detecting it, but I wake up in the morning if I've been wearing it the day before and I am smelling it on my skin, I can detect it. And when it comes to its projection and sillage, I find that the projection on this is actually quite good. So it's a moderate push on it for those who are within my vicinity. The sillage on this as I move through is exceptional, and I'm actually going to go more from moderate to full. The trail that this thing creates is fantastic. Glorious fragrance, strong recommendation. It's a fragrance du bois, so you know you're getting exceptional quality when it comes to the oils that they use, the actual fragrance composition itself. One of the questions. What is leather? What does leather actually smell like? The reality is that leather is a byproduct of dead animals. So therefore, it doesn't smell of raspberry tinge or rose infused or any of these components. If you really think of it logically, it should really smell of dead animal. I had an opportunity years ago when I was young. I lived in Queensland. Now, one thing that was close to us, I was in a town called Mount Isa, which is in the middle of nowhere. A local in that area was actually, he would hunt kangaroos, and then for the tourists, he would then essentially sell the skin of the kangaroo. Now, I remember grabbing this one time. I actually picked up the skin with still with the actual fur of the animal on there, and it stunk. It was stinky. It was and I've always been very sensitive when it comes to smells, and for me this smelled disgusting. Now, it wasn't treated, so he basically, what he did was he you know, obviously skinned the animal and cure it to some degree, and that was it. I actually thought, this is hand on my heart, I actually thought that my leather bag that I bought in Florence smells like that. This is what leather actually smells like. It was like my eyes finally opened. I'm like, of course it doesn't smell like that beautiful leather scent, you know, that I detect. Of course it's gonna smell like the hide of a dead animal. It just logically, that's what, it makes sense. So then how is it that we have now assumed that smell that you pick up from that article, from that bag, from the shoes, from the jacket, is leather? This has been an historical thing for us as humans. Throughout recorded history, different nations would actually scent their leather to some degree, whether it was by rubbing citrus or some kind of resin or something like that on the actual hide of that animal once it's been cured. It wasn't until the Renaissance, and this is the key here, and this is the birth of this particular, I guess, scent profile that we're now familiar with when it comes to leather. During the Renaissance, leather was seen as a sign of nobility. And it was mainly because leather was now being used in a very supple way. Up until then, leather was robust. During medieval, essentially, it was a great protection when it comes to wars and battles and things of that nature. It wasn't until the Renaissance that we now all of a sudden started using leather in a much more refined way, in particular for clothing. It was then the creation of gloves. And when you think about it, glove needs to be very supple. Secondly, it's very form-fitting on the individual's hand. So how do you do that? How do you grab the hide of this animal, which is very stiff and would have dried, and now make it so it can maneuver and do the things you want to. Well, you got to treat it. You got to treat it with these extreme chemicals, which in those days, in the Renaissance time, consisted of human and animal feces, so all that acid and the poo and all the rest of it, and horse urine. These were the key ingredients that would allow that leather to break down and become a lot more malleable, so that the tailors can now create these different articles, in particular gloves. However, these now stunk. You can imagine after a serious horse ride, you come back, you take that glove off, and nobody's going to want to come near you. You know, you would just, this hand would, you'd have to have it out here somewhere. So it was Caterina de' Medici. So I love how it all comes back to this incredible woman who I'm going to say was probably the first gangster perfume lover that was in history. Caterina de' Medici, for those who know the citrus story, have a look at this video that I created. She's the one that essentially just started this whole explosion when it comes to perfumery from Italy to France. Now, she's the one that loved leather gloves and asked the tanneries at that stage, which were in Grasse and Montpellier in the south of France, to create for her these beautiful gloves. But she said, I don't like the smell. What are you going to do about it? There was a glove maker, Maison Gallimard, that came up with a very novel idea of, you ready? Bathing the leather in rose oil and spices. Bada bing. I love, again, the fact that French leather is a nod to the way that the French prepared their leather products with that scented rose accent. Caterina de' Medici loved these rose-scented gloves. It became a hit within the French court. The aristocracy of the time fell in love with this also, wanted this product, hence the explosion of all things in Grasse. As I mentioned earlier, it's interesting that Grasse and Montpellier were really tanneries. This is where the leather goods were created. But eventually, it became the birthplace of all things perfumery as a result of scenting these leather goods, which then created this explosion of florals being created in that area. Jasmine, tuberose, rose, lavender, orange blossom. To this day, Grasse is known as the birthplace, or where we were extracting all these beautiful oils from those particular plants. But originally, that was where the tanneries were in France itself. How cool is that, to think that what we perceive to be something that was natural from nature, no, is actually something that was created as a result of a perfumer wanting to instill that particular article with something. I love that sort of stuff. It makes me super happy. Let me move on. This is HALFETI leather. I love this fragrance because I love the original one. So for those who are not familiar with HALFETI, I'd recommend you go out and test that. Recently, I had an opportunity to bump into the perfumer for this particular fragrance, Christian Provenzano. I did a video a little while back and I called Christian the rock star perfumer. I bumped into him at Exxon's. He made eye contact and he looked at me and he did, and this is how it all happened. He looked at me, he pointed and he said, I'm the rock star perfumer. At that moment, I thought, the man has seen my work and I'm so grateful that I never said anything that, that I shouldn't have said. Hand on my heart, Christian Provenzano is a rock star perfumer. If you look at his pedigree of fragrances that he has created, the man is incredible. As many hits as Elvis Presley, hence why he's a rock star perfumer. So I fell in love with the original HALFETI very, very early on. Have a look at this video that I created. At that time, coming in from designer fragrances where the designer market clearly states to you, this is a female fragrance, Gucci Bloom, bloody blah blah. This is a masculine fragrance, Dior Sauvage, bloody blah blah. And the two won't cross over. Whereas in niche perfumery, it says more, this is a fragrance or factory family. Now, up to you whether you would like to enjoy that or not. Could be a soft floral. As a man, soft florals, they're too heightened with aldehydes and things of that nature, so it's not really something that I would naturally gravitate to. I have some soft florals, but they're not excessively, very floral bouquets and those things of that nature. So when I first came into niche, I grabbed Halfeti, and this is like very early, and I sprayed it. And I remember smelling and going, whoa, this is amazing. I never experienced something so complex and so divine. It had equal parts of spices, but yet had some florals in there. But it also had some woody undertones. I bought it, not realizing later on that it was deemed as a female fragrance. I didn't think it was female in my opinion, and I enjoy wearing it. Halfeti in itself became very successful within Penhaligons, and they then released extra sort of variants. One Halfeti leather and the other one is Halfeti cedar, both with a little bit more darker edges to it. And what I find with Halfeti leather, it has that DNA from the original, the spices, the florals, with the difference that it's a much more darker, much richer and deeper toned leather notes that's coming through. I found that on opening, it does have that spice that I'm familiar with, but they've included a plum note. And I feel that when you think of plum, don't think of that fresh, picked off the tree. This is more something that has been seeping in its own juice, a lot darker, a lot richer, a lot ambery in its tone. Mixed in now with some spices, mixed in with the classic Halfeti signature black rose. The Halfeti celebrates the black rose that's grown in the town of Halfeti in Turkey. So it has a slight, to say that it's a rose, I think is misguiding. To say that it's floral is more relevant. To me, I don't detect it a distinct rose note as I would in French leather. For me, it's floral, but really the key hero here is leather. Leather in a much more pronounced way. This is a great winter fragrance. If you're going out, if it's a cool evening, you're going to be outdoors, Halfeti leather is just incredible. The sillage on this is fantastic. Its projection is enormous. And I find that its longevity is, well, not to say eternal, because wait till I get to these babies, but it really is, it stays with you and it stays with you. Because I love Halfeti, for me, this was an easy no-brainer. The moment I smelt it, I quickly identified that DNA from Halfeti, but now with these more darker, leathery tones to it, a lot more masculine leaning, there's a lot more strength behind it. And now this is a beautiful, cool weather, winter kind of fragrance. Whereas I find that for me, Halfeti is an all year round. I've worn it in summer, I've worn it throughout the year, and it wears beautifully. This is now my cold to cooler weather fragrance. The last two are in the very deep realm. So if you want a very dark leather, very deep, very raw, at the start of this episode, I talked about the duality. Leather fragrances have an equal part of rawness, animalic, but also this supple sort of lightness. These two beasts here, they just work on animalic rawness, I guess. The first one. But having said that, these are incredible perfumes. If you're new to niche, I don't recommend you commence here. I think these might be a little bit too pronounced for you, a little bit too intense. I would definitely go in this side of the scale. But if you want to test something that's gonna, like, where am I going? Where's my journey gonna take me? Then I would check out, this is a new inclusion by ZAHAROFF. And this is a powerhouse. One, I've said this before, I find that ZAHAROFF as a brand over-delivers on quality, it over-delivers on value. This one here is a great inclusion. The one that precedes this one is TABAC. And what's basically happened here, George ZAHAROFF has built on the architecture of that to a degree, but now added a whole new layer of leather with smokiness, with herbal and spicy notes. This is intense. I found that when it opens, it has a very clear, spicy component. It has this woody sage and star anise and this rosemary component to it. The funniest thing, I get like a licorice or artemisia. There's another something else in there. The whole thing is wrapped up in leather. So it's almost like you've grabbed yourself a very raw leather bag. So it's still scented with that beautiful leather scent. You've grabbed now rosemary, sage, thrown a little bit of pepper in there, put in the star anise, left it in the sun, just let it simmer in its own heat, and opened it up, and you're getting this beautiful blend of all those components. The other components in here is a smokiness. Now I know that tobacco is in this fragrance. I don't get the earthy tobacco, the sort of that gentleness, that sort of very welcoming tobacco component. I get the smoky part of it, almost like you're at a campfire. Now, this fragrance here, I find that you don't bring it to your nose. And so now there are certain perfumes. So Milano is a classic example where I do love to bring my arm to my nose and smell the fruits, that subtle suede leather component to it. It's divine. I love smelling this one here. That supple, beautiful leather component. But I don't smell this guy. I do not bring him to my nose. Recently, I had a friend come to my office who's new to niche, always loved designer fragrances. I recently introduced him to two awesome aromatic fragrances, one being Elysium by Roger Dub and the other one being Green Irish Tweed by Creed. He has both of them. He loves wearing them. We did a catch up here in the office. Now, one thing about my type of people, Italians, South Americans, the moment you come to our home, we're going to offer you food. And you may have just eaten, but we'll go, okay, what do you want? Do you want a dessert? Do you want something a drink or something? And you can't say no. It's almost to the point of being slightly offensive if you say no. What's wrong with my food? Why don't you want my food? One new layer that's happened with me is I'll say, you want something to eat, blah, 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 blah. But then I'll say to them, what perfume are you wearing? Or I'll smell, doesn't smell like you got a perfume on. Let me show you some perfumes that I would recommend to you. So my friend came over, we had lunch together, and I said to him, are you wearing anything? No, good. All right, let me spray this. And I just grabbed this without his permission, and I just sprayed it on his arm. And I said to him, don't worry about what it smells like. Trust me that this is an incredible fragrance. He smelled it up close, and he's like, whoa, my man. I remember, he's new to niche. He's just been in the aromatic dry woods sort of part of the world. And I said to him, don't smell it up close. Trust me, the sillage on this is going to be magic. After he left, he sent me this text, probably about an hour or so later. And he said, I just got, Mark, you smell amazing. I quickly wrote back, boom, baby. That's my like, yes, success. Because prior to him leaving, I gave him samples of all these other fragrances, stuff that I know he was going to like, but also, trying to push him in different directions. I said, did you spray any of the other fragrances? Which fragrance are you wearing? Then he wrote back, the leather one. The sillage on this is exceptional. The trail that this leaves is different to what you're smelling up close. So this is a fragrance my recommendation is don't bring it too close to your nose. What you're going to get is very strong, herbal, woody smokiness and leather, very pronounced leather note, where if you allow that sillage to do its work, it has another air about it. It has this beautiful, I do feel that it's slightly more masculine leaning. There is more of an edge to it. However, I have a very close friend of mine who loves she's a woman. She's petite on me, and look, and I'm a hobbit, okay, so I'll give you an idea, I'm not a very tall person, but on me she comes up to about here. She loves very strong, resinous, deep fragrances. The cliche is that most women like florals. She is not part of that genre. She loves very resinous, woody, very deep scents. I shared with her leather tobacco. It's a fragrance that she loves, and as I said, she's a very petite woman, and yet she loves to rock leather tobacco. So masculine, feminine, no problems at all, but just know that it is a much more pronounced leather fragrance. I find that the longevity on this is now close to eternal. You'll have this for 24 hours comfortably on your skin. I don't recommend that you spray more than twice. I don't see this as an office fragrance. For me, this is more like going out to, if you're going to be outdoors. It definitely leans more winter, so more cooler months. This is not a fragrance that I would wear in the summer. This is beautiful winter cool weather fragrance for me. Last one, Alessandro Gualtieri. For those who may not know or new to the channel, I am a severe fanboy of all things Alessandro Gualtieri. And as I said early on, what I love about niche perfumery is that these individuals take some serious risks now when it comes to perfumes. Some of their fragrances, I mean, and Alessandro creates a number of fragrances that are not designed for mass consumption. They're just too pungent, they're just too intense, it's just too much. This is one of those. If you want, I guess for me, the ultimate leather fragrance, the top of the tree, and I know that there's more, so there'll be other subscribers would want to recommend, no problems at all. In my collection, this is the top of my leather tree. There's another fragrance there by Fragrance Du Bois called Producer Michael. Way too intense for me. I don't have that one in my collection. I've tried wearing it, I've tried loving it because I know it's a beautiful fragrance, but it's way too intense for me. Whereas I don't know, CUOIUM is something that I just enjoy wearing. It's raw, it's animalic, it's super intense. Starts off with a very bright, it almost tricks you. It has this brightness, citrusy, but happiness to it, but it fades in a heartbeat. It's just like, it goes from alive to dead, you know, to just raw, intense, animalic. 2 sprays is more than enough. I find that the longevity on this is eternal. It'll go on for 24 hours plus. Interestingly though, it's not a fragrance that has enormous, it's not a room filler. He's got others in his ORTO PARISI lineup that are room fillers. This one here I find has a moderate sillage. I also feel that the projection is also on that moderate level. It's not too intense. I have worn this around my wife, Sandra, who doesn't like, as I mentioned, intense leather fragrances, and I can get away with it. She doesn't go, oh my gosh, what are you wearing? I wear this on the other hand. I wear this on the other hand. She's like, whoa. Actually, I wore it the other day. She's like, whoa, leather, leather. I'm like, yeah, I know, leather. It's a leather fragrance. Whereas I've worn CUOIUM and I don't get that same sort of response. This is a great soul fragrance. For me, if I want a really strong, grounding fragrance, something that will steal my mind, CUOIUM is a masterpiece. It is a much stronger leather fragrance, so heads up everybody. This is not whereas, and I love that these are the opposite end of the scale. Where this is suave, sophisticated, and subtle in its presence, this one is raw, potent, animalic in the way that it transmits its energy. Great fragrance. One thing that is definitely, and I just picked it up here on card, it does have oud. Well, we don't know for certain. Alessandro Gualtieri doesn't reveal these notes, but in smelling this fragrance, you're like, there's definitely a fecal-like quality, which can be attributed to oud. So the assumption is that there is oud in here because there is a fecal, animalic, animal rawness to this particular fragrance, combined with that leather, earthy, just, it's an intense fragrance. I also love that very clearly it denotes what kind of fragrance it is with this beautiful leather bound covering that it has. It's actually not leather, it's that plant-based sleeve that it has. It's another thing that I love about Alessandro's work. One is the Triskele. The Triskele's always been connected to spirituality, the 3 foot, and it also has the eternity symbol at the base, which also is connected to eternity, the soul, things of that nature. So as a great grounding soul fragrance, I'd recommend to you CUOIUM. And at the top of that leather tree, CUOIUM is a great place to be. Bada bing. There you have some amazing leather fragrances. If you're new, you know where to commence that journey. And those who may have already have a number, these are some really beautiful fragrances within that olfactory signature. Hope you enjoyed that. I'd love to know what your favorite leather fragrances are, and I'll see you all on the next episode.
You know